All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We do have a tight agenda today. We really worked hard to make sure we got the most out of our hour today. I want to welcome you to the first ever FAQs Live, really the first ever event for the Agility in Mind US subsidiary. So you are part of history today, folks. We're only 4 months old as an entity, so thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate that. All right, before we begin, let's do some quick intros of myself, Jess Brock, and Emily Koehler, my gracious co-host. We actually crossed paths a few years ago at a job that we both worked at an organization, and it's kind of a funny story. Want to give you some insights into that story and tell you a little bit about us as professionals. Emily, would you care to give your perspective of that fun story?
Sure. So at the time I was working as a Scrum Master and Jess was working at the Agile Dojo for this organization. And we happened to bump into each other in the cafeteria while I was doing a team building exercise that involved solo cups and string and lots of balls and balloons and things. And it is a really good time. And so Jess and I took a moment to connect about some of these team building techniques and stayed in touch ever since. Cut to last year when Jess started Agile Curated, which is a great newsletter that you should definitely sign up for. And I wrote a blog piece for that, and we've just kept in touch. So I'm really excited to be collaborating yet again with Jess and the Agility in Mind team.
Yeah, thank you for that, Emily. Yeah, when I walked into the cafeteria at this corporate organization and I saw this basically a circus happening before my eyes, and you're like, yeah, couldn't really find any meeting rooms, and we kind of did what we did, and I just thought that was amazing. So you're right, Emily. It has been, I wholeheartedly mutually agree. It has been great knowing you and learning from you. So thank you. So yeah, I lead the U.S. Subsidiary here at Agility in Mind. I also do some coaching as well. So I'm happy to have a job that lets me do strategy, and I still keep my hands in the coaching part of things. Let's see, as Emily had mentioned, I am pretty passionate about dojos. In fact, I just this week spoke at Agile 2021 about dojos. So yeah, we have our social accounts listed here. Please feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions or just want to chat. I think it's safe to say, I could probably speak for Emily when I say we always love talking, especially about better ways of working. Emily, a quick intro for you, your background.
Yeah, so once again, I'm really excited to be here collaborating on this webinar with you, Jess. I currently work at Dashlane, and I am a Scrum Master and Agile Project Manager. I have worked in financial services and healthcare, and now, purely tech. So I'm really excited about concepts that relate to Agile anti-patterns, and I've been really happy to be able to get into more of these coaching opportunities and also some writing opportunities with Agility in Mind as a co-collaborator. So looking forward to speaking with you more.
Awesome, incredible, and perfect segue for our partner Dashlane. So as Emily said, she works for Dashlane, and wanted to give them a special call out. They've been great in terms of collaborating for this event. And we'd be remiss to say, to not mention that, with security being so crucial in today's world, Dashlane's password management couldn't be more relevant. So they do a really, really good job helping people and businesses. So if you're into password management, I would certainly give them a look. And they keep Emily happy, so that's a good sign. All right, thank you. Okay, so today's topic. So I'm really happy to introduce today's topic, anti-patterns to avoid in an agile organization, not only because it's a sort of an opportunity for us all to inspect and adapt and think about how we could be better, but we can't even take credit for this wonderful topic idea. In fact, this topic idea came from a previous FAQs Live. A participant made this suggestion. So thank you for that. And please keep your ideas coming. There'll be a survey that we'll send out at the end of this event where you can suggest more topics. And in kind of keeping with that community theme and engaging in community, we took it further, and instead of just assuming which roles you would want to learn about, when it came to anti-patterns, we actually polled our LinkedIn community, and from that poll, we were able to narrow down 2 roles today that it seemed like the masses were most interested in, and those are Agile Coach and Leaders. So we'll be talking about those 2 roles in particular today. Okay. All right, Agile principles. We gotta consult the manifesto, right? That's what we do.
Shout out, yeah, shout out to the OG manifesto. So this is just a quick precursor for why are we all here today. When you think anti-patterns, we really don't want to be didactic and say do this and don't do that and these are the Scrum rules. In fact, that's very much the opposite of what we're going for today. We're simply hoping to frame this as an opportunity to inspect and adapt at regular intervals, and we're hoping that we can consider this an opportunity to connect and share experiences in light of that principle. So that should hopefully create a good backdrop for what we're going to talk about today.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, it feels right to bless the room with the manifesto. So thank you so much for this ad. Good stuff. All right, our agenda. We want to be forthcoming and transparent with what you might expect today.
Indeed. So we're going to try to keep right on time. We have a really packed agenda, but we of course want this to be a true FAQ. So the idea is that we'll go through those 2 anti-pattern examples that, as you heard, our LinkedIn community was most interested in hearing about. So we're going to give a quick overview of what an anti-pattern is to set the stage. Then we're going to go through some examples of Agile Coach anti-patterns. We're going to poll the room, see which one of these sort of archetypes people are most interested in talking about. We'll have a little bit of conversation between Jess and I, sort of set the stage, give some examples, some personal experience, and then we'd love to open it up and hear more from you about your experiences and your questions. We'll do the same sort of flow for the leadership anti-patterns, and then we'll close it out with some do's and don'ts for best practices on how to address these now that you know what they are.
Very good. Awesome. So before we get into talking about anti-patterns, we thought we'd level set on what anti-patterns are. So here's a quick overview.
Absolutely. So an anti-pattern is a common response to a recurring problem that's ineffective and risks being highly counterproductive. So I want to stress that this is something where you're being ineffective, but it's not malicious. So when I was describing this to a colleague and talking about the webinar that we were going to do today, he said, is that like dark patterns in UX? Is that similar to design patterns where we block people from unsubscribing to something, or we make it difficult for people to remove payment information? I said, no, it's absolutely not a malicious intent situation. This is probably more a situation where someone is blind to the issue and needs someone to help them recognize the situation that they've put themselves in, or that the team has fallen into. So this is really something that's sort of innocuous, but still a danger to the organization if it's left unchecked for a long time. And that's how we'd kind of like to frame it for today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that you kind of lean into it, sort of an innocent, oh boy, I didn't even know kind of thing. And that's oftentimes how it's characterized.
And so we'll definitely be able to make this clearer as we go and we talk through some of these examples, but some of the symptoms of anti-patterns could be applying effort to a situation, but things just don't feel like they're gaining momentum. Psychological safety has definitely been a focus of lots of Agile organizations of late. How do we create a culture and an environment where people can work together collaboratively and be successful? If that feels somehow diminished, then there could be some anti-patterns at play. And similarly, volatility is a common theme. We want to be able to continuously deliver at a constant pace forever, back to the manifesto, shout out. So if that is somehow going up and down and you're seeing a lot of change, a lot of restructuring, a lot of organizational turmoil, there could be some anti-patterns at play.
Right. Very cool. Yeah. And I mean, I think back to, so the first column here, the effort is being applied, but, symptoms just don't seem to be improving. And, there's been so many alignment workshops I've done. And if you think of SAFE, you think of program increments, all that time and energy and resources and just a lot of just expenditure, if you think about it, monetarily and just from an energy perspective, go into this alignment. And then it's pretty unfortunate and disheartening. After all that energy, you come back to see how we've done, right? We've aligned, this is go team, this is what we're going to do. And maybe we've only gotten, a small percentage, delivered and maybe partially achieved an outcome. And if that keeps happening, maybe there's an anti-pattern lingering. Maybe this is a time where you should have a retro workshop or a retro of retros and think, or scaling retros rather, to really be thinking less about alignment, but more about kind of getting things right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Keeping that inspect and adapt mindset in play.
Absolutely.
So now that we've kind of, talked through what an anti-pattern is, it's this innocuous, but somewhat unhelpful idea, that's been put into play. Do folks have questions before we move on to some of the more concrete examples for coaches and leaders? Just about what an anti-pattern is, if we need any more clarification before we go on to our next section. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. I think we're good to go, Jess.
Okay. Good deal. Sorry, I'm being, you can, I was fumbling with Zoom. Jess Edwards, do we have anything? Do you see anything before we move on?
Nothing has come through at the moment. However, if people do want to ask questions, they can always ask it in the Q&A function or the chat. We have them both opened. Or if they want to speak to you guys directly, they can press the raise a hand button and we can allow you to speak to them.
There you go. Great. Thank you for that reminder. Yeah, so, and if it's not a question, if it's just a comment, we love that too. All righty, we will carry on. So diving into Agile Coach Anti-Patterns, which this is going to feel a little funny with me. I think, Emily and I both do Agile coaching. So we might feel this might be an eye-opening experience for us. So we'll see. I was really pleased to see this be the top voted role on LinkedIn. This is the role that people wanted to learn most about when it came to anti-patterns. Let's see here. All right, so we're going to start with some common archetypes when it comes to anti-patterns for Agile coaches. So in the top left quadrant here, we have the facilitator. So this person is basically a scribe. They send the meeting minutes. They are the meeting planner. You get a million meeting invites from them. And it seems like they do more clerical work than anything. So that's an archetype for a particular Agile coach that we've seen out in the wild. We have the mediator. So this is, we have to deliver, what are we doing in the market? Deliver, that competitive spirit and it seems like they lean more towards stakeholders' needs than the team needs and the people needs. Then we move to the Messiah. This is a person who is an Agile coach that speaks in broad strokes. They think more theoretically. They don't really give you anything tangible that you can apply to your particular situation and context. So they may know the manifesto forward and backward, but it doesn't always translate to anything beneficial or actionable. And then we have our metrics maniac, which is kind of adjacent to the facilitator in a way that this person focuses more on just kind of doing the whack-a-mole to the symptoms of the organization and doesn't really get to the root cause and do that work to, try to upend anti-patterns and issues with achieving outcomes. So they kind of do that surface level work or the easy low-hanging fruit, but they don't get any deeper. So I'm going to pause there after that walkthrough and engage you all in a poll. And we want to know, before we move forward, we want to know which one of these archetypes you want to hear about most. And if we have time, we'll do more than one archetype. So here we are. Here goes the poll. Excited to see what you think. Oh, wow. So, I mean, it was like immediate. There's some passion in this. I like it. It's really cool to see. Emily, as a co-host, do you see the results or am I seeing them?
Yeah, I'm seeing it. We're currently tied with 2. So that looks nice. Okay, we've only got 15 votes though. 16. This is the kind of sporting that I like.
Yeah.
These are the stats I can get into.
Another tie. All right, we got a few people. We got 17 of 23. Who else out there can vote and help us break this tie? Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds here. All right. We'll go ahead and end the poll. It's been a little bit over a minute. We'll go ahead and call it. I'll share these results with you all. So we have a strong tie between mediator and Messiah. And I'm so happy Messiah was chosen because that is one that is personally a pet peeve of mine. I'm very, very passionate. I would love to engage in conversation about that. And then the mediator. So this is interesting. So the coach that seems to be keen on, the stakeholders. Okay, cool. Well, if we have time, we'll do, well, which one should we pick? Does anyone, do we just want to, you know what, I'll make the executive decision. Let's do Messiah. I've already revealed my hand that it's one of my favorites. So I'll just take my hosting powers and do that. And if we have time, we'll get into the mediator. How's that sound?
Sounds perfect. And we have an enthusiastic yes from another Jess in the chat. So let's do it.
Is this Jess Edwards or is it a third Jess?
I think we have a third Jess.
A third Jess among us. This is great. I love it. All right, can't get enough Jesses. So thou shalt do Scrum. We have the Messiah. This archetype as an Agile coach is something that I've run into personally many a times when I'm out doing my thing and coaching with companies and clients. Anyone can Google, right? Anyone, if they take the time and energy, can memorize information. And I feel like at the end of the day, that's all these messiahs really, that's all the benefit that they provide, right? They're just regurgitating what they've read and what they've memorized. And it's something that I'm certainly not saying don't reference the manifesto by any means. I mean, please, you leverage these wonderful resources we have available to us. I mean, if it's not, if it's the principles of Kanban, if it's the manifesto from an Agile principles or Agile or values perspective, if it's safe, if you're in some sort of scaled framework like that, they're all great tools, and you can use those as levers for learning, no doubt. But when it is literally, you cannot stray this line, you have to fit in this box, that's when it becomes so rigid that it's, well, not Agile, right? It's something that, like I said earlier, I'm very, very personally passionate about coming in and really challenging that mindset, because I think that, and I'll just speak candidly, so hopefully this comes across right. I have seen Agile coaches, particularly Agile coaches as consultants, almost when they take on this Messiah type archetype, they almost look like car mechanics. Like they talk way up here and people just nod so they can walk away and get away from them. And that's not helpful at all. It's very intimidating, and it actually taints the image of all Agile coaches and Agile in general. So it can be very, very detrimental. I'm going to pause there. You look like you're just teeming with a response, Emily.
I think we all know this person. I think we've met. Maybe we can put a face to a name. Maybe we can't. I do think though, when you have this parallel between the word Messiah and sort of the connotation between the person who is evangelizing, the Agile coach is expected within an organization to evangelize best practices. That's their job. They are responsible for training and coaching executives within the company, individual team members, people who aren't maybe, within an IT department, but all across the organization to say, hey, IT is doing this Scrum thing, or, why isn't accounting doing this? Or why do we have project managers in this part of the company, but we have Scrum masters in this part of the company? What's the big difference? So I think, providing information is their job, but if it's so high level, like you're saying, and it's not accessible, again, to use your words, you're tainting the image of these, Agile coach as someone who is really beholden to the organization. Because when you're saying, okay, if the goal is to educate and you're only intimidating people, you're probably not going to get very far.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, it's about, it's about hearts and minds. The people, are they happy? We make an impact. Are we improving? Not only our ways of working, which is obviously a big part of this, but the culture, right? Is this company better than it was yesterday? And I'm very hard pressed to say that regurgitating, the Scrum guide, the latest Scrum guide, is going to make a company better than it was yesterday. Or team or person, et cetera, et cetera. So it's
Completely
something.
agree.
Yeah. So, and it's easy. So you're probably wondering, like, am I Messiah? Oh no, I don't want to be this person, right? And I would say that for any of these Antipatterns that we talked to today, start talking to your colleagues. Just take this whole session as a moment to just reflect on your, be thinking introspectively, do I lean too much on, these industry terms and these theories? Am I speaking way up here? Am I not meeting people where they're at? And just do a pulse check with your clients or the people you serve, like your organizations you serve, and maybe your Agile coach peers. How am I perceived? I think that's one of the best ways you can take a moment to check yourself, because this is something that I don't know. I mean, maybe you have comments on this, Emily, but I don't know if you could really diagnose yourself as having this anti-pattern. I think you might need outside opinion to help you.
Yeah, I don't know if I could look in the mirror and say, yeah, no, I'm not doing this very well. And I think one of the things that I really, really love about this cartoon, which is from the Liberators, by the way, you can check them out on Medium. They do lots of interesting articles. But the thing I really, really like about this is it says, thou shalt do Scrum. And when we talk about Agile coaches, a lot of Agile coaches work with Scrum teams. They work with Scrum implementations. Maybe they work with scaled Agile, like, Jess was mentioning, if you're in a larger organization and you need some kind of, more adaptable framework for your situation. But an Agile coach should really understand all different types of Agile methodologies and frameworks. And they should also be comfortable working with teams that have no experience in agility and maybe don't need an Agile framework as their solution. So if you're working, at Dashlane, one of the teams that I work with frequently deals with plans, pricing, accounting. There's probably not going to be a different way of doing accounting between now and 20 years from now, because it hasn't really changed 20 years in the past. Yes, we've gotten better tools. Yes, we've gotten better reporting. Security has become an issue. But when you think about how to do, a financial audit, or you think about how to do some of these, regular financial type of activities and patterns, you might not actually need Scrum. You might be working with a traditional, project management style, or a different system altogether. So I think that this thou shalt do Scrum thing really speaks to me, because an Agile coach should be aware of the company's unique situation so that they can apply a solution that works for them, and not just reach in their back pocket and say, I'm most comfortable with Scrum, so we're going to do Scrum.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that call out to the other approaches to Agile and ways of working. If you dig holes for a living, which is totally fair and very needed in the world, you're kind of doing the same thing. You're not really innovating. It's not knowledge work. It's not deeply intellectual or requires deep thinking. So why overcomplicate? Just if it's working, why try to disrupt that? So I think that kind of, not to speak dismissively about accounting, it's something that just boggles my mind, and I just avoid like a plague and thank the Lord that CPAs exist. But no, you're absolutely right. It's you got to keep an open mind and do what's best, not just what's in your back pocket or what you're most familiar with in your Messiah mindset. How are we on time? Do we want to take a stab at the mediator archetype, just a couple minutes, or are we?
We definitely have some time, guys, don't worry.
Okay, thank you, Jess. So the mediator, all right. So this is the Agile coach that comes in, and I guarantee they had some really good rapport with leadership that said, I'm going to transform, we're coming in hot, we're shaking things up, we're going to deliver, we're going to make all your dreams come true. And again, all your dreams come true in terms of the stakeholders. So this could be really, really detrimental in terms of it kills psychological safety. So when you come in and try to meet with a team or meet with an organization, even if you want to go a layer or two higher, you're not really, again, meeting people where they're at. You're not understanding their constraints, the complexities that they work within. You're just sort of forcing, and whatever the stakeholders say, you're almost like a parrot of the stakeholders, right? That's probably one of the last things they need is another, if the stakeholders expecting an Agile coach to act like this mediator, this go-between, that's probably an archetype that doesn't need to be parroted, if that makes sense. So this is something that, again, I would say signs of this that I've seen out in the wild. If you feel like people are a little bit closed off, or they feel there's just a sign of tension, or whenever you set up a meeting, if you're the Agile coach, I'm kind of putting it in the Agile coach's shoes, people seem a little tentative towards you, I would certainly take the opportunity to meet with them and ask them even directly, hey, am I doing a good job supporting you? And then maybe you do need to redial and sort of find that Goldilocks zone where you are very much aligned with outcomes, and you definitely want to support the organization, no doubt, but you have to, there's no way you can do that without supporting the people, right? Empowering the people, getting people where they need to be. And building that trust. And you're definitely going to kill it if you're just doing what this guy does and breathing down the neck. What do you think, Emily?
Completely agree with everything you said to this point. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind with this particular archetype, and one of them is, having a mediator or having someone who's kind of watching over your shoulder, again, as you said, breaks down psychological safety and stops people from being able to say, I don't know. It corners people into the thought that they have to be a subject matter expert on what they're doing, rather than having a learning mindset. The whole idea of Scrum and the whole idea of cross-functional teams that sit together and work together daily, collaborating between team members and stakeholders, is so that you can learn together faster. And sometimes that means that you fail, but if you fail faster. And right. One of the things that, at Dashlane, we hear a lot, either from our CEO or from members of our leadership team, is you can definitely lose, but don't lose the lesson. There shouldn't ever be a moment where losing is the end of your job, the end of your life, the end of the conversation. It's just a moment to change what you're doing and move forward, because it's not about this relationship between the mediator and the team. You owe me something. It's about the organization coming together as a whole to deliver value for the client. It's never about you. It's about the client. It's about, the product you're shipping into the universe, the change that, you're hoping to make for people at the end of this value chain.
That's brilliant. I love it. I wish we are recording this. Great. Because I want to take I love it in terms of, you're absolutely right. It stifles innovation. If you're not vulnerable to make mistakes, then how can you make this product, this initiative, whatever it is that your organization's unified around, how can you make it better, right? You're not going to challenge anything because you don't feel safe to, because you feel like someone's micromanaging you. You know what I mean? This is great. Good. Are we ready for Q&A?
Oh. I'm ready. I'd love to hear what folks are thinking. Could be questions about anti-patterns as a whole, about either the mediator role or the messiah role, or Jess, it looks like we have Omar raising their hand.
Perfect. Let's let him speak to you guys directly. So I'm just going to open his mic. Omar, what is your question?
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Lovely, thank you very much. So interesting. I just wanted to ask about the first one, which was the Messiah, and I just wanted to, so because I was reading about the Shu Hari, and so at the beginning stages of learning for a team, you tend to go with the Shu. So that's when you're like quite prescriptive. And yeah, so you kind of have to spell it out for them. So I was just wondering on your thoughts on that one.
That's a really, really good question. I like that. So I think, so when I hear prescriptive, I guess I take it the way I interpret it is, yes, you're absolutely hand-holding, but you're hand-holding within their context. So for instance, you're, like Emily was saying, you're not going to what you're most familiar with. Maybe it's the Scrum framework that's where you have all your experience in. You adapt to that team, but you understand their context and hold their hand during that Shu period, right? So maybe they're more Kanban oriented. Maybe they use less and not scaled agile. You know what I mean? And you try to leverage, you know, that framework or context to your advantage. What would you add, Emily?
I do think that, Shu Hari is a great example of, teams progressing through their development. And, another sort of stages of development is it Stuckman or Struckman, where you have storming, norming, forming. I almost like that more because when you're dealing with specific team dynamics, I think that it, when you say Shu Hari, I tend to interpret that as more of like technical prowess or expertise. So you're learning specific skills. But of course, that can also be interpreted as, the muscle memory, the how of, putting these agile practices into the universe. For me, when you look at, first building a team and doing something that's a little bit by the book, I think that the main question is, does the team want to do that? As an agile coach, you have to know who your audience is and who you're serving. The idea is to get the most value at the end of this for the user. And if the team is saying, I don't really get this, like I'm not quite there, you might need some more coaching or some more teaching before you can really get the buy-in from the team to say, I'm ready to do Scrum. I want to set up a board. I want to use stickies. I want to do X, Y, Z. But maybe even before you do those things, you have to start with, okay, we currently use projects. Let's do a retrospective on a project that we're running, or let's, do a stand-up just on Fridays to begin. I think it's really about using some of those best practices and doing the basics, but doing it only when the team is ready to accept that that's helpful for them.
Yeah, I like that you call out that distinction. Thank you, Emily. But and using Tuckman as more of a measure for teams, because being a dojo fanatic that I am, the Shu Hari gets mentioned quite a bit, and I think Shu Hari better attends to individual skill development and that habit development too. So even so, I think just having a mindset of meeting people where they're at is always the best way and being empathetic. But just a distinction there, as I see Shu Hari as more of that, habit building more at the individual level. Interesting though. Okay. Does anything else, Omar? Does that help or?
No, I think that's quite good. Because it's more sort of when I was teaching Scrum to a team that I'm working with, they kind of needed a little bit of guidance because they just, it was a team of 19 people that I split into 3 teams, and they really needed that sort of hands-on. What are the Scrum sort of ceremonies? How do we do them? How do we do definition of done? How do we, I did have to be the Messiah just at the start, but then once they got the hang of it, I was very happy to let go of being the Messiah. So I was just thinking that, you might have to be the Messiah just at the start, just to get them sort of going and then let go.
Well, is it Messiah or mentor or guider, right? Because it sounds like, and I haven't worked with you, but I mean, it sounds like you weren't totally rigid, like thou shalt, you have to do it 15-minute stand up, you have to, you know, have, you have to know your velocity every day. I don't know, some very rigid rules, right? I mean, you flex to the constraints of the organization?
No, I think maybe I'm being too hard on myself in saying that I was the Messiah then. Maybe
Yeah.
I was a mediator. Maybe a bit of both.
Okay, fair enough. Good.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
You bet, Omar. Thank you for the question.
Great, thank you for that one. We've got another one coming from Denna. She's asking, with the Messiah, you mentioned that getting with the teams to ask if they feel like things are going over their heads. But do you have some other techniques as an agile coach to be able to collaborate and ensure you're addressing actual issues, not just theories?
So I don't want to sound, I don't want this to come across, sarcastic or, insulting it at all. But I mean, really, it comes down to, are you succeeding? Are you meeting your outcomes? And I think that's a telltale sign if people are actually getting it. Are they understanding these, the practices, the value of them? Or are they just kind of know what a sprint review is? You know what I mean? They may not know, the purpose and value of it. So that'll kind of give you a distinction of, do they know the word, or do they know the purpose, right? And the value. I'm going to pause as I collect my thoughts. Emily, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd love to sort of hear an example of what things might be going over people's heads, if it's more about the needing to demystify Scrum or Agile, and just a lot about sort of the mystical Harry Potter type words that we use for things like ceremonies and all of these other words that just sound like we should be wearing pointy hats. Sometimes I wonder, like, is this a cult? We have all of these bizarre pieces of language that are such a barrier to understanding. But if it's in terms of a practical solution, I do think that just what you said is sort of the compass that we should be looking towards. If a team has a problem, we solve the problem. We don't necessarily have to use, agile, retrospectives or any kind of framework to solve it. It could simply be, conflict resolution techniques. It could be something completely outside of the realm of, people don't want to do the review. Why? Do they not want to do the review because managers are using that as a way to hold them accountable to things that they never committed to? Are they, so I think it's really what I would love to hear more about, an example of the conflict, so that we could give you more of a tangible example on like how to change it.
Right. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's sage. Yeah, because that could go a few different ways. I think we might be at the point where we switch to the leadership anti-patterns, but we'd love to connect with that individual. We could certainly have a dialogue more on that later.
Great. We've got a couple more questions, but we'll come back to them in the next Q&A just to catch up on some.
Sounds lovely. Thank you, Jess. Okay, so let's get over to our second role of the day, leadership. I hand this off to you, Emily.
Thank you. Oh gosh, I'm so excited that all of the questions are coming through, but we can't answer them because we have more content. All right, so leadership anti-patterns. We already kind of gave you a run through of the coach anti-patterns. So Jess, if you want to just pop over to the next slide, we'll share these archetypes with you. Again, we're looking at a 4-quadrant view, and we will be polling you to see which ones you're most excited to hearing about. But just to speak through these briefly, the absentee leader is someone who sort of goes MIA. They go missing. They assume that because there's no role for a leader within the Scrum framework or the Scrum guide, teams should be self-managing. What is the role of a people leader there? Am I just signing checks and golfing? No, the answer is no. You should definitely be supporting the organization. You should be clearing roadblocks for the team, helping with, the best team formation and staffing. I think staffing is a huge, huge conversation we could have a whole webinar about, but that's the absentee. The visionary, This is someone who, if you subscribe to the same newsletters as this person, you know what they're going to talk about at the team meeting. You can see their opinions changing with the wind. If Harvard Business Review comes out with a great article on Scrumban, they'll say, you know what, we have a cool thing going, but I'm thinking that we need to restructure, we need to reorg, we need to do this new process because it sounds super cool. I think that, context switching is a killer for lots of teams, and we can definitely get into some concrete examples, but that's your visionary. They're chasing a dream, maybe not so much the actual reality of the company they work in. And then for a micromanager, this is very similar to one of the Agile Coach examples we gave, but this is a person who cares more about themselves as a stakeholder rather than the end client or even the happiness of the teams that are delivering the value for the organization. Hey, where's my status report? Why can't I get this information exactly the moment when I request it? Maybe they're not actually quite in tune to how the team is working and how to best collaborate with them. And then the enforcer, of course, I hope that you don't see this in your real life and that it's only in cartoons or Dilberts. But this is someone who's going to say, I want you to stop doing this. I want you to start doing this. There's no negotiation. There's no conversation about what might be the best approach. There's no real conversation. It's just do what I said because I said it. So I'm going to pause and take a moment, and we'll poll to see what the most interesting anti-pattern here is for folks to talk about, because we'd love to get your thoughts.
I'm not quite sure which one elicited faster responses, the leadership or the Agile coach.
Hard to say.
Yeah, we have a clear winner on this one.
We do.
Or just a few more moments. Give people a minute. We have about 10 seconds left. Okay. Go ahead and wrap that poll up and show you what we have. So absentee is the clear winner, followed by, of course, a tie, micromanager and enforcer. And I will give you the authority to pick between those two, Emily, if we have time to do a second archetype.
That sounds perfect.
Alrighty. Let's pull up.
So, yeah, I'm honestly shocked. I am really glad that we gave 4 examples and we didn't just decide to self-select, because I would have never imagined folks would be as interested in this one. An absentee leader can maybe feel like a blessing depending on the leader you're talking about. But I do want to stress that there's a difference between someone who has a light touch and someone who's not meddling within the team's activities, and someone who has completely abandoned the team to their own devices. A leader within an organization maybe doesn't have as clear-cut a responsibility to a development team or a team that's implemented, an agile practices as a coach does. So maybe they need assistance from a scrum master or an agile coach to understand how they can be most helpful to the team and what activities are detrimental. So I think when you see an absentee people manager or leader within your organization, you really want to make sure that you're available to them to teach them ways that it's helpful to engage with the team and ways that are very detrimental. So for example, we gave the example of an agile coach who's letting people into a team's review, and leaders are saying, well, oh, you said this was going to be done at this time, and why is it taking longer? And they're using that review session as an opportunity to berate the team rather than to ask questions about what they can do to unblock their work, provide additional resources or information that would make their life easier. Because again, we want to be collaborative between stakeholders and team members, but in a situation where the absentee boss is gone, you simply can't collaborate, and it's very difficult for them to assist teams if they're not around. Jess, are there helpful examples or thoughts that you have on this particular archetype?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I see good qualities of leaders. So when you start getting the servant leader realm, you know, you're there, you are making conditions the best that they can be for your team to perform the best that they can, right? You're nurturing them, their career growth, their needs and wants as much as you know, as much as possible. You're giving them the resources. When I look at this particular picture of this person taking just a lovely nap, you know, their job could be, you know, what can I do to enable this team even more? One of the biggest things I've witnessed out in the wild is where, yes, the team seems to have resources. Yeah, I feel like I'm a leader and I sign checks all the time to get new tooling and staffing and stuff like that. And it all, you're like, there seems to be a disconnect. And the number one enabler that you can provide that really doesn't cost much time or dollars for that matter is the affirmation and assurance of the organization's outcome, that alignment. So is this story that I'm working on have value? What does this mean? You know, and you can make sure that you are consistent in your messaging and your delivery on these are the clear outcomes that we're seeking for this organization. And you make sure that the teams and your organization are constantly aware, you're all unified. So that is a huge, huge thing you can do to enable the team. And if they're not aligned, if there's a problem with achieving those outcomes, then that's when you can come in and start looking for resources to support them. But to me, that's a picture of a great leader, one that can be consistent with their, with delivering the outcomes that the organization needs, and making sure that their team is very aware and crisp on that, and doing whatever they can to enable the path to achieve those outcomes, and definitely not doing it taking a nap or golfing, self-managing. It's great. You can get out of the way, let them, the knowledge workers and the people close to the work, trust that they're doing the best possible work. That's great, but they also need to be supported, right? You can't go to one board meeting or program increment meeting or something like that and just think the job's done. No, you definitely have to nurture that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm hearing that sense of validation is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we are kind of running against time. We have about 12 minutes left. Any other comments on absentee? Do we want to take a stab at a second one, or just kind of go right to Q&A? We do have a slide or two after this role too, so we want to be cognizant of that.
Jess, I think it would be great to just touch on enforcer briefly. I think enforcer and micromanager both have a similar theme. And I'd love to go through an activity with you if you feel up to the challenge.
I do. We just have to make it super quick.
It's gonna be super quick. So with both the enforcer and the micromanager, the thing that frustrates me the most, and I think the thing that's most detrimental to agile teams, is that you're going to see a lot of context switching. You know, if the leader comes in and says, oh, you know, we've completely gotten rid of this OKR, we're no longer doing this project. You know, I want you to focus on this thing instead of this thing, do it right away. It's very important. You're completely disintegrating any form of flow that you have, and regular delivery is kind of the goal that we're working with in Agile organization. That should be the goal. So Jess, I would love it if we could pull up the whiteboard briefly, and I'd love to give an example of how micromanaging or enforcing type archetypes in leaders can really, really create context switching that slows teams down and has an antithetical sort of effect to what they were hoping for. So Jess, you know your name. Your name is Jess Brock.
It is?
You know how to spell your name. And I'm going to ask if you can just write your name from, you know, one side of the board to the other. Just write it all the way through.
Okay.
And let's see how long that takes. So you're familiar with your name, you're familiar with writing. Let's go ahead and write your name across the board.
Done this many a times, yeah.
I know whiteboards are a little bit hard to work with, but you know, we can see you're making progress. This is pretty steady work.
Yeah, look at me.
Yeah, so this is the good situation. We're expecting that you have the skills and the knowledge and the familiarity with the subject matter to write your name. Great. But what happens when we have someone who's asking us to context switch, to constantly be interrupting our daily work to give status reports, interrupting our work to stop doing one project and start another project, creating this level of uncertainty? So in order to reflect that, Jess, I'm going to ask you to write your name. You're still working on the same thing. You still know how to write. You still know what your name is. But instead of writing it all the way through, you're going to take the first letter of your first name, and then the first letter of your last name, then the second letter, then the second letter, and do it like that. So we'll start with J, and then B, and then E, and then R, and go on, so on and so forth. And see how long it takes when we do it that way. So instead of working on one cohesive project, we have flow. We're doing it separately.
Wow, this is really hard.
And you have to think about it. Like, you shouldn't have to think about it. So this is maybe a little elementary school, but I did want to give folks this little tool as a way to visualize it. You know, what happens to teams' effectiveness and their productivity when you ask them to context switch in this way.
Well, that was really good. Yeah, that was harder than it looked. And no, you're absolutely, I mean, the outcome, yes, was similar, but like the time it took was, and just it was just complex, unnecessarily so. So okay. Imagine doing that when you're building complex software or, you know, infrastructure. I mean, that could be a lot more than just a couple additional seconds. So good exercise.
Exactly.
So let's do a little bit of Q&A for leaders. So probably wrap us up. Do we have anything?
Nothing's come through for leaders at the moment, but people could still be typing.
Give it a moment.
So we do still have some from the Agile coaches we can go back over whilst we give people a time to type.
Okay, it looks like Omar raised.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Let me give him speaking permissions again.
Hi, Omar, we've missed you.
Hi guys, thank you. Yeah, so my question was, how do you coach some of those anti-patterns out of leadership teams? I know that's a loaded question, but just like any tips would be great.
Yeah, I hear that. Can I ask you that question? No, it's you know, in my experience, I've found you got to be. We kind of all know this. This is a general rule of thumb, but leaders are busy. You have to be really crisp and intentional with their time. And you know, giving them concrete examples. You can't refute data, right? You know, you can say, hey, here's your outcomes. We both can agree that it's not where we want it to be, right? The organization's not functioning optimally. We're not meeting our goals, right? And then follow that up with some you know, factual behaviors that you've observed from them, and just and keep persistent with them, and you know, keep that dialogue open. We also shameless plug for Agility in Mind. We do a wonderful job. I'd say one of our strengths are the leadership workshops that we offer. So there's resources out there as well if you want to get an outsider's opinion, which can be powerful, you know, to have a third party come in.
That's super, thank you. And I guess, you know, invite them to those sessions, those sort of, you know, show and tell sessions, so that they can give the team some feedback, maybe engage them that way.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And hey, you know, I mentioned scaling retros, you know, a few minutes ago, but you know, who knows? I mean, if the leader wants some feedback, you know, why not? You know, do that as once a month or quarterly. You know, reach out and get some meaningful feedback, not just your standard corporate survey, right? 1 to 5, but see if you can get some meaningful advice from your team.
Super, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. What else do we have?
We currently don't have time for any more questions. However, as there are some questions in the Q&A that we haven't got time to, we will answer them at the end. So at least if you do have to pop off, we will send the recording so all the questions will be answered.
Okie dokie. I will move on then. Thank you for that, Jess. So we're going to send it home with some do's and don'ts.
Absolutely. So we've already given a lot of examples of the tangible what, so what is an anti-pattern? What does it look like? What are some of the symptoms? And so I won't, speak to every bullet point on this slide, but I do want to highlight a couple. One of them in terms of, best practices for how to deliver some of this coaching and how to really put these into practice is engaging your curiosity. So as Jess mentioned, it might be hard for you to see it in yourself if you are engaging in some of these behaviors or activities. And so, relying on your community, on your manager, your team members, your mentors to really say, am I engaging in these behaviors? Or if you see an anti-pattern in action with someone in your organization, maybe turning down your judgment and turning up your curiosity. This is a great quote I love from Lissa Adkins. In coaching agile teams, I think back on it all the time. Is what I don't want to villainize this person. I have to work with them. I just want to be curious about what was the expected outcome that they were hoping to achieve, and why is it different from what's actually happening? How can I help them get on the right path? And then in terms of don'ts, this is one thing that I tend to do all the time, but I'd love for you to avoid is swooping in and fixing the problem yourself. As coaches, as mentors, as leaders within our spaces, we oftentimes take a lot of the responsibility to fix problems on ourselves. And sometimes doing that will rob others the opportunity to find the solution on their own, or collectively as a team, so that you can own that solution together and put it into the world together. So those are the two that I'd really love to just point out, but obviously we'll be sending the recording and the deck so you can refer back to this later.
Yeah, good stuff. I love that, especially the last one, and just kind of be patient, let people, certainly be there to mentor and support, but it's really powerful in terms of lessons learned to let the team figure it out, or the organization figure it out as you help guide them. That's great. It's hard to do though. It's hard not to just be like, I know this one, I've seen it before, but it can be very powerful. Great. So with that, we want to send our sincerest thanks for you for attending today. Just for next steps, we will do the session recording. We'll be sending that out. So you'll have that and the session survey in your inbox. And like I said at the top of the session, we get tremendous feedback from that survey, including topic ideas such as this one today. So we'd appreciate any comments you have for us. I believe Jess had said that we are going to hang on for any additional questions if you would like to hang out and chat with us. Otherwise, we will call the session done. Thank you again. Emily, any closing words?
I just want to, thank Jess and the Agility in Mind team for having me. I really enjoyed the time and the insightful questions. And yes, definitely stay. If you have some time, if you need to run to another meeting, totally understood, but we'd love to wrap up some of the remaining questions that you'll have. Much appreciated.
Great, thanks guys. So I do know Dana wanted to speak live. I don't know if she's got to hop off, but if she is still free, if she raises her hand, then we'll let her speak on the mic. If not, I'll go through the chat first and then go through the Q&A just so we get through every questions. So going back to the Agile coaches, we've just been asked if we can share some examples on Messiah in actions.
Messiah in action. So let me think about that just for a second. I'm going to pause and think. If you have something, Emily, please feel free to butt in.
I think for me, Messiah is really any example of an Agile coach who is speaking from the Scrum guide or speaking from a textbook and not looking in front of them at the situation they're walking into. So, it's kind of like when a stand-up comedian bombs, because they didn't know their audience and people aren't laughing. It's not funny. Similarly, with an Agile coach who is being a Messiah, they say all this stuff, but it really doesn't mean anything to the team because either they're being too high level or they're just not applying the information that they're trying to convey to the company's situation. So you're over here talking about retrospectives and stand-ups and stuff, and the team is like, yeah, but we work in farming, like where are we supposed to literally go? Like how are we going to talk to each other? Like do we meet at the water cooler? I don't understand. So it's sort of that, you know, that inability to see what's in front of you because you're so excited to say the next thing that you have in your pocket. You know, you're not actively listening or actively taking in the team's needs.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah,
that is a big sign of a messiah, is that they are not active listeners. They more listen to respond rather than listen to understand. And I love that stand-up comic example, because it's almost as if they say their canned joke, they see the reaction from the crowd, and they keep forcing it. That's where I think it's the distinction of messiah really comes in, is that they keep sort of thou shalt scrum, thou shalt you know, have a, you know, stand up every single day and have a sprint that's exactly 2 weeks, because all I know is scrum and this is what I've done. And we're going to attend to my experiences and familiarity rather than the unique needs of the organization. I hope that helps.
Great. The next question comes from Samuel. They are asking if there's an argument to say anti-patterns can be a sign of healthy developing, of the team developing, sorry.
So is the question, can anti-patterns be a sign of the team developing?
Yeah, so is there an argument to say that anti-patterns can be a sign of healthy team developing?
If the team is, or any individual is speaking about anti-patterns and exploring them and curious as to if they have an anti-pattern, absolutely, that's a sign of maturity and you know, forward growth and progress. So if they're even inquisitive about it, or they even know what it is, if it's in their vernacular, that's a really good sign.
I think for me, I would maybe place a distinction between an anti-pattern and constructive conflict, because again, going back to Chuckman's stage of team development, you're going to see a lot of storming, you're going to see conflicts, you're going to see disagreements. And I do believe that some of the anti-pattern examples that we've given could very easily fall into examples of constructive conflict, where teams need to work out what works best for them and make collective decisions together. So I think if we're you know, talking about it in those terms, absolutely, you know, you could see some of these conflict resolutions within the team being examples of anti-patterns at play.
Yeah, and anti-patterns shouldn't be confused for growth, right? And maturity. So of course, you're to kind of echo and parrot exactly what Emily just remarked on, is with Tuckman. I mean, yeah, you're totally going to be storming, and meaning you're going to be flailing, making mistakes. You're more in that shoe level of development, right? And that's totally fine. But I think the archetypes we chose for today are more, no matter where you're at in the maturity spectrum, if you're an enforcer as a leader, that's not going to enable anything positive, right? That's going to be a detriment, you know, or if you're, let's see, if you're more keen on metrics as an agile coach, that's a sign of more of a junior agile coach, or more an insecure agile coach that's looking for low-hanging fruit to sort of sound like they contribute, that they're adding value, if that makes sense. So we definitely don't want to poo-poo growth and development. We certainly encourage it, right? Personally, it's something I value very deeply, is introspective and self-awareness. So I hope that makes sense, because we don't want to say that, you know, struggling in the beginning as you learn something new is bad. No, it's totally good. That shows you care, that you're trying. Anti-patterns are something that, you know, you, like we were saying, you innocently kind of fall into these patterns as you're, you know, you're doing your thing as a Scrum Master, product owner, agile coach, developer, any of the roles, right? That you may not be aware of, that could be causing real harm.
Great. So we also have one from Richard, who is saying, I'm so glad you haven't had malicious anti-patterns, as I definitely have. Do you always think they're accidental? I tend to see panic in senior management throw teams they don't like into product areas if they feel the department isn't delivering enough value to their bosses, even though they are going to fail. Do you see things like this at all? And he did send you guys a link in Wikipedia.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, Brooks Law. Let me reread this.
So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it goes again into the team formation question too, right? You know, why isn't my sandwich made? You haven't ordered it yet.
Well, and I go back to, so if something's malicious, like someone knowingly is an enforcer, stands behind that, then they're just a jerk. To me, that's not an anti-pattern, you know, as much. And then that's just my personal definition of it, I suppose. I mean, it's fair to say that they're not always accidental. I mean, I have an experience with an organization years ago. I had a leader who was an enforcer. Let's just put it politically correct like that. And it was ridiculous to go into work every day. It was like a dark cloud every time you go walk into the building. And this particular person was told about this and still didn't change their behavior. The thing is the turnover continues, I think, to this day to be really, really high. So, you know, you kind of pick your battles. If you want to embrace these anti-patterns and not change, know that there's going to be negative results that come from it. I totally agree, Richard. I mean, I don't think it's usually innocent, and that's how we've probably naively took it. You know, today we didn't want to attack anyone. And in my experience, it truly is innocent, at least from a coach's perspective. And I know that that's a unique perspective, but no, there are people out there that unfortunately are malicious. I think that's something to call out for sure.
Yeah, I do think that there are some natural limits to the edge of coaching. You know, like there's a moment when you've given examples to the person. Okay, when you did this, it resulted in this, which was bad because this. You know, you've given your very tangible fact-based feedback. You've invited them to engage with the team in ways that work for the team. So for example, hey, we have our team review every other Thursday. You're welcome to join there. You're not welcome to join in the retrospective because that breaks down psychological safety. You know, you give them these guardrails, you give them all the information they need to be successful. And if they still continue to, you know, really wreck psychological safety and be a nuisance to the team, that's maybe not even a coaching moment. It might be an HR moment. So I think, you know, we hit a limit as coaches when we recognize that there's only so much feedback that someone can give before it becomes, you know, an organizational problem, and you want to talk to your people team.
Mm-hmm. No,
because you also have an obligation to do that, right? You know, we don't want to be ruinously empathetic. We want to go full forward and say, hey, there's a problem here, and we owe the teams to raise it.
Yes, love radical candor. I think that's lovely. You know, leverage your resources. Yeah, HR and the people team certainly are something that's what they're there for, you know, and hopefully it doesn't get that to that point. And perhaps in our roundup, our email out to the attendees, we should include Radical Candor for sure as a resource. It's a great book by Kim.
Absolutely.
Great. So last question that we've got now is, when an agile coach identifies antipatterns, the cause for the same could be the team or possibly a person outside the team. What is your opinion about coaching the people in and outside the team?
Could be within the team or possibly a person outside. Oh, so you're okay. This question is, if I'm understanding it correctly, is this another Jess or?
No, I do believe there might have been some sort of glitch with Zoom, that there were a couple of Jesses. So
okay,
we'll figure it out.
No worries. But in any case, sorry to derail us. I think this is the anti-pattern is being caused by something that's out. Is this saying that the person is having an anti-pattern because of an external factor, like constraint within the organization? Is that how I'm interpreting this, Jess or Emily?
I'm
reading
I
it?
kind of read this as, what are the different techniques? Like, how would your technique differ in addressing an anti-pattern if it was happening because of behaviors inside the team versus behaviors outside the team? So how would your approach to resolving the situation be different if the cause of the anti-pattern was either in a team or outside of the team? That's kind of how I read it.
Okay. Yeah. Is this person still on the line who posed this question? I mean, we can answer it both ways. That's fine too. I can quickly answer the way I interpret it, and that is, at the end of the day, we need to be accountable for our behaviors and actions. So no matter if, for instance, with leaders, they might become enforcers because they're getting heat, and oftentimes that's what I've observed is exactly that. They're actually really great people, and it's just that they're getting that thumb pressed on them from the top. That's not an excuse to be an enforcer, to be a jerk, right, to your teams. You need to be confident to be able to break that pattern, and if that means talking to your superiors or whatever the path is. So that's a quick response to the way I interpreted it. I don't know, Emily, if you want to take a whack at the way you interpreted it.
Yeah. So I think for me, the key difference when you're addressing an anti-pattern that is, happening within the team versus that's caused outside of the team, really putting a name to the problem is very helpful for me. So if it's, is this a regular dependency? Is this, we need something from a team and that team isn't able to deliver, so we are blocked from being successful? I think that has its own resolution. So similarly, if it's, a structural problem where teams are not staffed appropriately to be successful, we're not cross-functional enough, I think that kind of goes back to the dependency problem. But for me, when I'm dealing with situations and coaching opportunities with someone outside of the team versus someone inside the team, it's a lot harder because I have to work more to flex my empathy muscle and understand why this person is doing this thing. Because your first reaction is, what a jerk. You just, you're upset. You're upset because it's causing dysfunction and you want it to stop. But you have to, again, step back, turn down that judgment, turn up your curiosity and empathize. Okay, are they getting the thumb, as Jess, you were saying? Are they, under pressure, under, some kind of scrutiny because of what's happening? And if so, again, this is a moment for alignment with leadership, alignment with teams. Are we all on the same page, or is there some confusion about, this is a priority and we thought this was the priority? So there's a moment of alignment, there's a moment of understanding. And I think getting to that alignment when you're dealing with folks outside of your team just simply takes a little bit more effort. And so for me, I think that's the main thing, is you have to really flex your emotional maturity muscles to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be the first to say that if you have an anti-pattern outside of your team that is causing a negative impact to your team, that's going to take some work. And, naturally communication, setting up that rapport, all, leading with curiosity, all of that is going to take a little bit more work than if it was internal. So it's hard out there. It really is. So good luck to you all.
Great, and that's all the questions we have had this session.
All righty. Well, these were some good ones. Thank you all for your energy and participation.
Yeah, and thank you for everyone who did stay on a little longer. I know we went over, but at least we've got through all the questions, so thank you for hanging in there with us.
Thank you so much, everyone. Again, it's been great working with you, Jess, and the Agility in Mind team. This is a lot of fun. I can't wait to rewatch the recording and see how many times I said and made other mistakes, and use this as an opportunity to, again, retrospect and inspect and adapt on the way that we do things. So here's to many more FAQs in the future. And thanks again, everyone, for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Ditto to everything Emily just said.